You are now entering the Mysterious Historians podcast. Professional wrestling, a sport that has existed as long as men have been confused about touching each other, a flashy charade, or a true contest of strength, strategy, and showmanship. Today I sit down with Dr. Rogelio Hot Rod Hernandez to discuss the profession that is wrestling. But first, everyone loves a statue. No one loves dusting, and statues love dust. This love triangle needs an intervention. Sue's statue wax keeps your marble so slick, dust can't stick. Available in bricks or tubs. And now, on to our show. Dr. Hernandez, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
What is your connection to the world of professional wrestling?
I host the most wrestling podcasts. I host 6 of them. There's the Squared Circle podcast. There's Bouncing the Ropes podcast. There's the WW What podcast. And there's 3 more. And it's just something that it was the first piece of theater that spoke to me and became like a metaphor for life. Good versus evil.
Paint the picture for me. Young Rogelio, just learning to breathe, to see, to ingest entertainment. How do you stumble upon this?
Where, it's a Saturday afternoon, the cartoons are done, and I'm like, what am I going to watch next? And then all of a sudden, next show, there's these big beefy guys in little shorts, running around a ring, beating each other up and sweating all over the place. And I'm like, I think this is for me. And I grew up in Texas. These were the Von Erichs. They were all from Texas. And that was my first, and I was in.
What appealed to you about it? The savagery, the showmanship?
The sequence first. The sequence that they would wear like on the way in, like they'd be wearing like these robes. And I thought that was like, that's a good way to enter into any room. Like get a good theme song, get a good robe. I've spent a lot of money on my own robes. We won't get into that, but tens of thousands. Anyway, there was just something about it gave me confidence. I didn't really like sports too much as a kid, and this was the first one where I was like, this is sports. Like this is real,
That leads me to a very pivotal and controversial question about...
Don't do it.
Professional wrestling.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Is it a sport and is it real?
Oh, if I could just give you a headlock right now. I won't, because it would put you to sleep. I think that it's a little bit of both. I mean, here's the thing. You can't fake a chair shot to the head.
Yes.
You just can't. I know from experience. I've tried hitting myself with a chair on the head. Yep. And... you can't fake it. There's no way. So you still have to be an athlete in order to show the people and convince them that these moves are affecting you the way that they are, It has affected me a little bit. Some doctors are concerned because of the chair shots, but it's part of my art and it's part of my passion.
Everyone must make a sacrifice.
That's right.
Now, the other question is, while the pain might be real, is it a sport? Do you consider it a sport or a punch-filled play?
Here's the thing. We just had the Olympics, right? If someone can dance like a kangaroo, if someone can shoot a gun, if someone can swim for hours and hours, and you call that a sport, then I'm sorry, but wrestling's a sport.
I think you've made your point. We know your history with wrestling. Let's talk about the history of wrestling.
Love it.
Man grappling with man, woman grappling with woman, goes back to Roman times. Where do we convert from that sort of wrestling to the professional wrestling we know of today?
Do you hear that ping? I'm hearing like a ping.
I'm not.
Okay. It's fine. I thought I heard a ping.
Okay.
It's also really bright in here. But I'm sorry. The last part of the question, the Greco, said Greco?
When do we go from Greco-Roman wrestling, the wrestling that is in the Olympics wrestling, to the flashy, showy wrestling that we know of today?
You got to go as far back as like the 30s and 40s. You have carnivals. You have vaudeville. You have wrestling has been around forever. And what was happening is you realize that wrestling just on its face surface is really boring. Like, it's just 2 guys grappling. It could last hours. There could be no winner. And someone was like, how do I make money out of this? Well, You start adding a little bit of pizzazz, a little bit of razzle-dazzle. You start coming up with characters. You start writing the end of the match, and you make it exciting. You put theater into it. It's a perfect combination of theater and wrestling. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. It's a perfect combination of theater and wrestling. You know what I mean?
Yes. Nothing. Well, we'll definitely schedule you an MRI after this.
Hilarious.
Yes. So we have these sort of early, as you said, vaudevillian acts of wrestling. Mm-hmm. How does it transfer from something small and regional to the enormous national theatrical event it is today?
2 words, TV. Oh. Okay. So once TV started, you needed to find things that were easy to shoot, things that were already happening. Wrestling was one of the biggest hits in television back in the 50s when TV first came out. People loved it. That gave it a wider audience. People were excited about it. You had very clear villains. You had very clear heroes. You had very clear villains and heroes.
Let's talk about heroes and villains. What makes a villain?
Well, in wrestling terms, you have heel, which is a villain, and you have the babyface, which is the heroes. So a heel is someone who's going to cheat, someone who is going to yell at the audience, someone, back in the day, unfortunately, someone who's just a foreigner. Just even being a foreigner would be a villain back in the day. Someone who's like feminine, a male who is feminine might be a villain because that's going to really rile everyone up. Now there's more subtlety and there's more levels and depths. But back then, it was just how can I antagonize an audience, right? And this is something that I was trying to realize at get-togethers for family. How am I going to antagonize my family, right? So it's like, after we pray at Thanksgiving, I throw everything off the table, or I steal money from my parents, or I lock my sister out of the house for a whole night. It was just me practicing wrestling stuff.
Now, you were sent away in your teen years. Speak to how that...
Where'd you get that?
Well, it's on your website.
Okay, yeah, I forgot about that.
And on your criminal record.
Oh, that I didn't forget about. Okay. I guess we can get into that when... there's that pinging again. It's kind of like it's kind of like up here. You don't hear the...
No, I don't.
I was sent away. I think it was... I was in middle school, and that's right when I started getting into wrestling. And at school, during lunchtime, all the other boys would go play basketball or, football or whatever. I wanted to wrestle. So I found the smallest, weakest kid, and I just started like, hey, let's wrestle. And before he could say like, what? I got him in a headlock, body slammed him, threw him against the wall. Apparently he couldn't take it because then they kicked me out, and my parents said this isn't going to work for us, so they sent me away.
Let's talk about the villain a little bit more. Would you be the heel? Is that your wrestling persona?
Yes, my wrestling. Now that you bring it up, like anyone would ever ask me to step into a ring, but if you did, I would be Dr. Dark. And I would come in a black cloak with a black mask, and then I would take off the cloak, take off the black mask, and there'd be another black mask on me. Mm-hmm. Before I was painting black on my face, but that was problematic, so I switched to just a black mask under another black mask.
What is the significance or storyline behind just having one mask under another mask?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just more black, more dark. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, that villain is dark.
He's so dark
plus
that
more
under
dark.
His mask is another dark mask.
Yeah.
What would his tagline be?
Oh, well, okay. Do you mind if I go into like, this is kind of like James Lipton, like, can I please speak to Dr. Dark?
Please, may I please speak to Dr. Dark?
Okay. How do I get into it? This is Dr. Dark. Your time is over.
Wonderful. Chills.
I thought so.
What makes a babyface? What makes a great champion?
Besides being boring, it's just someone who's just going to like feed to what everyone wants. Patriotism, eat your vitamins, say your prayers, America's #1, I drink milk instead of vodka, waving flags, kissing babies, and all the girls like me. Overrated.
Who are the greatest heels of all time?
My nickname is named after the best of all, and that's Roddy Hot Rod. It's Roddy Hot. It's Hot Roddy. Roddy Piper.
Roddy
Piper. Was it two Rowdies? Rowdy. It's Roddy Piper is the best villain of all time. I think he just set the bar. I think that also don't sleep on the managers. Don't sleep on Bobby the Brain Heenan. Also one of the greatest villains of all time. For a time, I think The Rock brought it to a very wonderful art. I think Macho Man Randy Savage brought it to an art. I think Jake the Snake Roberts brought it to an art. Now the line is a little bit more blurred, but like when we're seeing like the 60s to the 80s, it's a very definite, you're a bad guy, you're a good guy. And some of the bad guys back then were really, really amazing.
You mentioned racism being a large part of a heel in the wrestling community. How about somebody like an Iron Sheik?
Yeah. So you knew that he was bad news because his boots curled at the tip, like at the front.
Okay.
You know? And of course you realize, he's actually from Detroit. But yeah, he built up this character with this accent of being from Iran. You know, in the 80s, we had a lot of animosity towards Iran and the Middle East. And his partner was Nikolai Volkov, who was like a Russian. So 80s, it's like Hulk Hogan versus these foreign guys. And that was unfortunately the truth. It's like, if anyone came in with an accent, you're a heel. You're a heel. Now I think, hopefully that's not the case, but it definitely defined my politics.
Oh, what are your foreign policy opinions?
Listen up, all you non-Americans out there who are coming into this ring trying to show us your side of things. Your time is over.
So your heel's fatal flaw is that he is a racist.
Yeah.
Your last name is Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
So are you the Spanish kind of Hernandez, or are you the, South American, Middle American, Central American, Lower North American kind of Hernandez?
My last name is actually Tweed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Hernandez is also one of the best heels in world-class wrestling in Texas. That's Gino Hernandez. So that's where Hernandez comes from.
Okay, so yours is a straightforward, white, racist, black mask wearing heel.
Thank you, wrestling. Am I bleeding anywhere?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'll keep you abreast of if
Sometimes people be like, you're bleeding, and I couldn't even feel it. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you're bleeding. I'm like, from where? And they go, the eyes. What were you saying?
Crazy. Who are your favorite baby faces?
This is going to be controversial.
Okay.
I've never been a Hogan guy. I have never been a Hogan guy. I'm sorry.
So whose guy are you?
The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Talk about someone who represented the real American, the true American, the working man. Never had a great physique. He was just kind of a bigger guy, but he had all the charisma and the moves to really go over. So he's probably one of my faves.
I know you're not a fan, but let's talk about wrestling before Hulk Hogan and wrestling after Hulk Hogan. Mm-hmm. What's the difference? What's the transition?
So before Hulk Hogan, you still had what was called the territory system, meaning certain parts of the United States had their own wrestling company. So you had the Carolinas, which was like Ric Flair. You had the Midwest, which was like Vern Gagne, and that's where Hulk Hogan and lots of the 80s WWF guys eventually got poached from. And then you had New York, which was Vince McMahon Sr. When Vince McMahon Jr. came on to take over what was at the time, I think it was the WWF, he was like, I got to make this bigger. Cable TV is a thing. How do I make this huge? And at that time, the biggest star was Andre the Giant. Once Vince McMahon Jr. realized that he needed to find these stars, he went to all these different territories and started poaching all these wrestlers. Hogan, Heenan, Iron Sheik, they all got swiped up from the AWA in Minnesota. People like Roddy Piper came over from Portland. He just started scooping up all these people, promising them contracts and money. That eventually led to the rise of Hulk Hogan winning the belt from Iron Sheik, and that was the first night that Hulkamania really ran wild. That led to the first WrestleMania, which was like 83 83, 84, I think. And that was the first time where something like that had been like, what's pay-per-view? Pay-per-view? What is this pay-per-view? So Vince knew that there was a good business move to start airing these huge events over pay-per-view. After that, WWF became the biggest, strongest wrestling company in the world and have never looked back since.
What did a young you do when it was on pay-per-view? Were you allowed to see it?
Who's you do?
You. I'm asking.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant like another wrestler named Young You Do. What does a young me do?
Mm-hmm.
When
these were being played, did you ever get to see them live? Did you watch them on pay-per-view?
I used to just watch I used to wait until they were on VHS. After they used to come in those really cool, big, bulky like plastic containers for the VHS tapes. I just remember, like those glossy, like the Disney movie ones.
That's fine. You don't have to keep explaining.
And it's just like it snaps shut, and then it's like in the back, you read a paragraph that gives you a summary of what the.
While that is wonderfully descriptive, is not information I need or my listeners need.
Bless you.
I didn't sneeze.
So I think I would watch them on video, and then we would sometimes trade them, or like an uncle of mine, like my rich uncle, used to buy the pay-per-views, so we should see a few there. I also subscribed to the WWF magazine, which was very exciting. Every month they got a new magazine, would read all that. It was like a drug. I was getting it where I can.
Yeah. Until you did actual drugs.
That's on my website too?
And I can just tell. Oh. Now, you've mentioned the 80s. Many people believe that the early 80s is the golden age of wrestling. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
I do agree. Without the golden age in the 80s, I don't think wrestling would be where it is today. And as much as they hate to admit it, I think a lot of that is due to Hogan. A time in the country where it was very patriotic, very USA. He fit that persona. He fit that description, that hope that everyone was feeling. He was huge. Not a great wrestler. Like, if you look at his moveset, he is not a great wrestler, no matter what anybody said. But he had the charisma, he had the muscles, he had the look, the blonde hair, and he was champion for so long. And Vince always had him at the top of the bill. So I think that combining that with what's going on in the country back then, very pro-USA, I think all those pieces just came together to create that boom.
Now, how would a fan of the time when The Rock was huge, they might fight back? They might say, now it's bigger, now it's more. The Rock is probably one of the biggest movie stars that's ever come out of wrestling.
They're going to try to fight me about that?
Yes, because they're going to say the golden age is now, or the golden age was 10 years ago, or 15 years ago.
If they're trying to fight me, all right, now you listen to me. I know more about wrestling than you ever will. And your time is over.
I think we need to work on those.
Huh?
When a statue loses an arm, that's hilarious. But when a statue loses its shine, that's a tragedy. Suze's wide range of statue balms, greases, and creams are just the thing. Available in 3 scents: bubblegum, ash, and statue. And now, back to our show. What makes one blonde, balding, overly tanned strongman different than another blonde, balding, overly tanned strongman?
That's a great question, because sometimes I'll watch a match or I'll see him and I'm like, I just don't see it. I just think that Vince liked his wrestlers really big, which is why we have our Andre the Giants, our Ultimate Warriors, our Hogans, and didn't give a lot of attention to the smaller guys. Now, during this time where you have people like those I just mentioned, you also have your Randy Macho Man Savages, your Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, some of these guys who were actually smaller, even Piper. Piper wasn't like an overly muscular guy, but they could get away with not just their wrestling skill set, but they could also get away with their character. It's almost like if you said, oh, like who's a flashy actor who you're like, oh, they're just really, really flashy for flashy's sake. They're not like a good actor. So like Tom Hanks. Okay, whatever. Like no talent. It's all flash. It's all shallow. Just whatever. Like there's nothing deep. There's nothing deep with Tom Hanks, right? Whatever. And then you have Liam Hemsworth, where it's like, okay, now we're getting there. Now I see some art. I see some emotion. I see some depth. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't at all.
Are you screaming?
What do you think of a babyface becoming a heel or a heel becoming a hero?
That's definitely happened many times. One of the biggest and best of these was back in the late 80s, early 90s, when after years and years and years of friendship, Andre the Giant tore that crucifix off Hogan, said, "You've never challenged me for the belt. It's my turn." And that took everyone by surprise. All of a sudden, and this is full circle, what do? They put Andre in all black. So now he's wearing black. So now it's black. It's dark. He's a villain. And that led to the record in WrestleMania 3 of the most people attending a wrestling event. I'm trying to think of heel to...
Was it Macho Man Randy Savage?
Yeah, he kind of flip-flopped a lot. So Randy Savage, yes, he was a heel, and then his valet, Miss Elizabeth, had left, and then she came back, and they got back together, and they got married in the ring, and then he was a good guy. Yeah. Wow, you should be the doctor. You know what I mean?
I love a Slim Jim. Look, you keep mentioning all these characters, the auxiliary people, the announcers, the managers. Let's talk about them, though. They were their own characters. Were your favorite?
They were. I mean, it doesn't get better than Bobby the Brain Heenan. He was funny. Oh, in wrestling, there's something called heat, which is basically like you're able to get this reaction out of the audience where they're just like, they hate you and they yell at you. So he had really good heat. He knew how to antagonize an audience while at the same time being very funny. You also have Jimmy Mouth the South Heart. He had a megaphone. He wore music notes on his jacket. And speaking of Macho Man, there was a time when he was being led to the ring by sensational Sherry Martel, or Queen Sherry. And I have to say, don't sleep on her. I mean, that's not literal. You know what I mean? Like, don't. It's a saying. It's like, don't forget this. Like, I'm not insinuating that anyone should like sleep on top of a person. I just want to make sure that's clear.
I think it's
when
clear.
I say don't sleep on. Okay.
What are your thoughts and feelings about Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling?
Which version? Because we have the actual Glow, and then we have the Marc Maron TV show, which I auditioned for. You know, I had a little stint in acting, and didn't get it. It was literally one line, but didn't get it.
What was the line?
Right this way.
Oh, you delivered that wonderfully.
Thank you. Yeah, apparently, it didn't work.
So let's talk about the actual 1980s Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling.
I love it. They found a word that the initials spelled another word. You know what I mean? Like Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling also means glow. I thought that's really creative. I tried one recently called Blow, but it didn't really work.
What did the BLOW stand for? Take your time.
It was Brutal Legs of Wrestling, and it said blow below the waistline.
Now, I can see why people might be confused.
Still can't.
But an armless wrestler would love that. Let's also talk about wrestling in other countries, most notably Lucha Libre.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you a fan? I
am a fan. There's the wrestlers are going to be a lot more aerodynamic. They're going to do a lot more things jumping off the rope. They're going to be flying a lot more masks. There's a tradition where you cannot ever see a wrestler's face under a mask. If someone takes your mask off, that wrestler can never be seen in Lucha Libre ever again. Some wrestlers took that so seriously that even in their everyday, like, casual clothing, they would still have a wrestling mask. El Santo, which is probably the most popular Mexican wrestler of all time, was buried in his mask when he died. And I get it, because I'm like, hey, when I go, keep a mask on me. Keep the two black. I was able to go into that without the Carmina Burana, the song.
You did it.
That's wow. I just lost it again, because it's obviously very complex. It's like a Liam Hemsworth type character.
Most controversial moments of wrestling.
Number one is probably the Montreal Screwjob.
Okay.
Have you heard about this?
I have not.
So I won't get too into the weeds here. When I say that, I don't mean that I'm actually going to go into like a field of weeds. I just want to make sure that's clear. When I say into the weeds, like I'm not actually going into like some weeds. It's a saying to be like, I don't want to get too deep into the, you know what I mean?
Thank you for explaining.
Yeah. But here's the thing. don't sleep on the Montreal Screwjob. I think that it's one of those things where like Bret the Hitman Hart was about to move from WWF to WCW. And he had agreed that on his last match wrestling in his home country of Toronto, Canada, that he was going to remain the champion against Shawn Michaels. In the match, towards the end, Shawn Michaels has Bret Hart in a submission move. And before Bret Hart even can break out of it, Vince McMahon runs onto the stage, tells him to ring the bell, and they pretend as if Bret Hart submitted, and he never did, so that they can give Shawn Michaels the belt. Mm-hmm. This was the first time that the curtain was pulled back and people were realizing, oh, this is something real that's happening. That's not part of the script of wrestling. And it really broke open that. And then there's a great documentary about it where in order to get his revenge, Bret Hart goes backstage to talk to Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon says, I'll give you one shot. Bret the Hitman Hart punches him, and then he walks away and goes to WCW. I tried that once. I was like, all right, I'm going to give you one shot to a lot of people who antagonize me. Mm-hmm. I have since really regretted that because a lot of people have hit me hard.
Yeah. You can't pick a fight if you don't know how to fight.
That's a beautiful saying.
Because the only person you beat up successfully was a small child.
When I was also young. I wasn't an adult.
You're right.
No matter what my website says.
Credit where credit is due.
Do you just have like a book of these sayings? These are amazing. So the first one was, you can't pick a fight if you fight. What was it? You can't pick a fight.
That's not a saying. That's just something I'm saying.
Got it.
So that was one of your most controversial moments. Give me another one.
Another one I think I already mentioned. I think the first time that we saw Andre the Giant turn against Hulk Hogan, that was a huge like. Can I swear on this?
No. Next one.
Next one I think is Hulk Hogan eventually going to WCW. No one ever thought that was going to happen.
What happened? How? Why?
I think he left WWF. He was getting a little bit older. A lot of they were bringing a lot of the WWF.
Do you need me to shake you?
Yes, please. WWF wrestlers. Which at that point it was probably WWE. One more time.
Okay.
WWE. Thank you. WCW was getting a lot of those wrestlers, so Hulk Hogan finally came back into WCW. And then to number 4, he turned heel, which was huge. People did not ever think that was going to happen either. Hulk Hogan turned into Hollywood Hogan. And again, what was the big change? Guess, ready? He went from wearing yellow to
black.
How did you? I really thought I was going to stump you there. I'm sweating.
It's okay. Greatest moment of all time in wrestling.
It's a personal story that no one got to see. Does that count? I don't know what the rules are.
There are no rules.
These sayings you have, they're really good. You should write these down.
I will.
Okay. It was El Paso Civic Center. WWF came, and after the show, we knew we would drive around the back, and that was where the wrestlers would come out afterwards. One of my favorites back then was Jake the Snake Roberts. And he comes out, he's carrying his snake in his bag, Damien, and he's walking, he's kind of slow, very much like his on-screen persona. And I run up to him and I said, Jake, I'm such a huge fan, can I get an autograph? And he was having none of it. He was like, well, I don't really have any time. And I was like, please, can I get your autograph? And he said, well, do you have a piece of paper? And I was like, where's the piece of paper? Turned to my mom. I'm like, Mom, do you have a piece of paper? She took out of her purse a bank deposit envelope that she had and a pen, and he signed that for me, and it just said Jake the Snake Roberts, and it lived in our grandfather clock back home for years and years and years. And sometimes I would just take it out and I would just stare at it. And
it's a beautiful story. But I meant the greatest moment in wrestling that was not a personal story that's yours.
Oh yeah. One time it was El Paso Civic Center. And Honky Tonk Man was wrestling. He was like this Elvis character. And he used to break guitars on his opponents. And the guitar would just, the wood would just like explode all over the place. After the event, I ran down to the ring. I picked up a little like 2-inch piece of the guitar. And the next day I showed everyone at school, hey, everyone, I have some of Honky Tonk Man's guitar historical.
Okay, we're going to try one more time. Third time's the charm. That's one of your sayings.
Right.
Be proud of me for having. In terms of the history of wrestling, if documentaries were made about professional wrestling, what do you think would be the number one moment, good moment, not a controversial moment, in wrestling?
One time I went to the
No, it can't, the story can't start with I.
Okay.
Or El Paso.
We? Mm-mm. Okay. WrestleMania 3.
Great. It's a great answer.
Because we were watching WrestleMania.
Nope.
Yeah, are my teeth hurting right now?
I can't answer that question for you. Do you have any other inside terms? Any other inside secrets about wrestling? How do they take a chair hit? How do they bounce?
Well, like I said before, and to my in my own experience, you can't fake you shake me one more time. Yeah. Thank you. You can't fake a chair shot to the head. That's gonna happen. It's just gonna happen. Something that a lot of people don't know is a lot of times when you're watching the wrestling match, you're thinking that a referee is telling the guy, hey, get out from the corner, or hey, don't punch him in the head. What he's really doing is he's communicating to the wrestlers what the backstage producers are telling him. So like they might be telling him, the referee through an earpiece, tell him that it's time to go home, which means wrap up the match. Mm-hmm. Or tell them, hey, it's time for the big move of the match now. So, like, if you see him going like, hey, your boots are weird, or whatever, he's really telling him, you have 2 more minutes of the match. Let's wrap this up. So the referee is communicating to the wrestlers in real time.
Ooh,
or like if there's a commercial break, they'll be like, all right, we're going to commercial. And I've been to live events, so the live tapings, it's really weird because when they go to commercial break, the wrestlers kind of stop wrestling and they just keep one move. Like it'll just be like a 2-minute long headlock until they come back from commercial break, and then the match starts again. Those are usually my more favorite parts of the match.
You see the real honesty underneath it.
Yeah.
How does this happen? How does do they choreograph it? Is there a choreographer? Do they just line up 7 moves and they do it for 2-3 minutes?
There's something I've heard of in acting that's like a beat sheet where you just have the certain beats of a scene and then you can kind of make up everything in between, but as long as you hit those beats. I think a wrestling match works the same, where they have the start of the match, then this guy goes over, then this guy goes over, and this guy goes over, and then this guy sometimes, and then, did you get that?
I did.
Okay.
Well, since you're starting to lose words, I think it's time to wrap up. What would you say to a young wrestling fan today? How would you tell them to dive in, to approach the sport?
All right, now you listen to me, kid. People are going to make fun of you. People are going to say it's not a real sport. Girls aren't going to talk to you, and some family members are going to ignore you and make fun of you and not go to your high school graduation. But you just listen to one thing, kid. You walk to your own theme song, wear your own robe, and remember. I forgot my.
So good.
I forgot the wrestling motto.
Let me try.
All right.
Dear listeners, thank you. Walk to your own theme song. Wear your own robe. And remember, there are no rules under the sun that you can't break if you try.
Slow clap. Slow. I'm saying it because I've lost all the feeling in my hands right now.
They're bright red.
They are really red. They're throbbing.
Dr. Hernandez,
yes.
Please tell the people where they can find you.
Yes, I am not on social media, but I do have an email address if people want to write to me. And I send out a newsletter every 3 days of what's been going on in my life. And that is doc.hernandez.wrestling. Should I spell that or should we just?
I think people know.
Wrestling. It was one wrestling. I said it twice. I just want to make. Should I start from the beginning?
I think I can edit out the second wrestling.
Okay. At hotlinks.com.
Hotlinks?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard of that one.
It was a free one I signed up for in the night.
Thank you so much for everyone for listening. And thank you to Ithamar for being on the show. Ithamar, tell them where they can find you.
Thank you, Colleen. You can find me on Instagram at Ithamar Enriquez. I believe I'm also on TikTok, but not as much, but basically Instagram.
What do you got going on TikTok that you're ignoring?
I was using it to do some of like my comedy bits, and then I got really lazy. And every once in a while I'll jump on there to like promote a show, but mostly all my promos are on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's too much work.
It's too many platforms.
Too many platforms. Too many.
Speaking of too many platforms, if you want to see more of the Mysterious Historian, she's on TikTok at the.mysterious.historian, much like Hot Rod's email address. And YouTube, she's the Mysterious Historian 666.
Oh.
Yes, and if you live in Los Angeles, there's going to be a show called Hutch of Horrors at Dynasty Typewriter, hosted by the Mysterious Historian on October 29th.
Oh, fun.
So whenever they put that on the website, go get tickets. Goodbye.
Bye.